Ask the Podcast Coach for June 15th, 2024.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music. It means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there, it's not Jim. No, it's everybody's favorite Scotsman, Danny Brown from DannyPod.com. Danny, how's it going, buddy?
Oh, good, mate. I'm super excited to be on this. I mentioned I'm going to be Jim Light this morning. I don't have the hair or anything, but I'll try my best.
I'm sure you'll be fine. Danny is the head of podcaster support over at Captivate.fm, which I'm a fan of. And I've bumped into you a couple times at different conferences and such. And I was like, there's a guy I'd like to hang out with more, and that would be Danny Brown. So thanks for, what time is it over there? Well, you're in Canada, so you're not in the UK, but what time zone are you in?
I'm on Eastern, so it's currently 10:30 in the morning. I think it's the same as you. There you go.
Not a problem. Excellent. Well, one of the things we do here, Jim usually does it. I have a water bottle. I don't have a coffee mug, but Jim likes to drink coffee. And so that coffee pour, which would be this one, is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. If you want to look good, they see you before they hear you. There's really only one place to go, and that is podcastbranding.co. He's done all of my artwork for all of my shows, and the beautiful thing about Mark is he's going to sit down with you one-on-one, which you're not going to get from somebody on Fiverr, and really, he wants to know about your show so that your artwork can match what your show's about. I mean, he's the marketing guy, you're not, and with Fiverr, you got to do the marketing part and then have somebody hopefully design something that looks good, and that's just not the way it works with Mark. He's awesome. He's also a podcaster, so if you need you don't have to explain what a podcast is. He'll design a website, he'll design a lead magnet, he'll design your logo. Again, if you want anything to look good, there's really only one place to go, and that is podcastbranding.co. We're like Joe Rogan, Danny. We do all the ads up front, and then we can get out of the way. But we also want to thank Dan from Based on a True Story Podcast.com. If you've ever, I know for me, if you're in a theater and you're watching the trailers and it's all dark and it's a black screen and then white letters show up, Based on a True Story. Well, Dan is the guy that goes, okay, based is not, this is exactly fact. It's it's based on a true story. And if you want to know how much liberty did they take with the story, well, there's one place to go, Based on a True Story Podcast.com. Dan will fill you in on, he brings on experts and stuff. I know I was checking out the one on Napoleon, and apparently the movie is not exactly what you might call accurate. But that's always the fun part when you're skipping centuries at a time. Yeah, how do you squeeze all that stuff in? So with that, as always, if you have any questions, if you're watching live, you can throw them into the chat room, or if you want to actually jump into the video, you can go to askthepodcastcoach.com/question. And so one of the things I wanted to start off with today that I thought was a kind of a, got to think about that one a little bit was, and I'm looking for it, I just had it. What is the end game? So this person asked this question. He says, example, in the 1990s, the goal of every comedian was to get a sitcom. So in this day and age, what is the end goal of podcasting? What is the ultimate mountaintop? I know we want to maximize plays and subscribers and sell merch and get brand deals and sponsorships, but what's next? What are we supposed to be striving towards? Don't get me wrong, just podcasting is something I love doing, but if I want this path to be long-term, I just try to see what I should be looking for on the horizon. And when I saw this, my gray hair just grew, because I remember being in when I was playing music, we wanted to get our CD. We're going to record a CD, but where can we sell it? Because back then the internet was still kind of new, and we couldn't get it into Best Buy. We couldn't get it into local stores. We didn't have access to everyone. And so my answer to this guy was, you're kind of missing the boat here. Podcasting is the mountaintop. You're on the mountain going, where's the mountain? And I was like, if you think about it, for me, and this is just me, but I talk about a subject that I love. I get to meet awesome people like Danny. who do the same things I do, so we can geek out on that. In some cases, I use about 5 different monetization strategies, so I make a little bit of money along the way. I grow my circle of friends. I grow my influence. I've gotten a few jobs because of my podcast. I get more comfortable as a speaker. I've had times when people have just said, Jackson, can you get up and say something? Like literally just off the top of your head, and I'm much better at that. I am boosting my knowledge of making content now, and I think I'm better at that than I was, say, 19 years ago. And I mean, for me, I'm doing what I love. So for me, this is the end game. And I just read a book and people are going to go, is he talking about the guy from System of a Down again? Yeah, it was actually an interesting book. But he said, the real art isn't in the finished art piece, whatever it is. In our case, it's an MP3 file. He says the real art is in the creation, like the process you go through. So I don't know. I mean, I get what he says, like when you're a comedian on the Tonight Show or Jimmy Kimmel or what is it, Graham Norton over in the. See, I keep thinking your accent makes me think you're in the UK, and you're not. You're just north.
I'm just here to confuse you, Dave. That's my role in life.
But I don't know. What are your thoughts on this, Danny?
Yeah, I think it's like you say, you always need to have a sort of long-term plan. I know Ashley Hamer, over at Descript, she mentions this all the time, where you have to plan out what you want for your show. So you were on about last week's episode, or last week's stream, you're on about what happens when I get 5,000 downloads, what next? And for me, it's like you say, podcasting is the end goal. It's what you do from there. So is it to boost your personal brand, your business? Is it to boost sales at a company? Is it to boost awareness of a company? Is it to get you, speaking on podcast shows like this, etc.? So I feel that question, I saw that on Reddit and I was waiting for you to jump in. Actually, I thought this is a question that Dave is going to jump in on, and lo and behold, I think I saw that question. I thought that was a strange one because it does sort of ask the wrong question, because you should already know what you want the podcast to do for you. And that's part of the goal with starting it. If you're taking it seriously, if it's a hobby podcast, it's entirely up to you what you do. It's fun, you love it, full power to you. But if it's something that you want as a serious thing, you should already have all that stuff in mind as to what next when you reach goal 1, 2, 3, etc.
Yeah, that's. I know we all want more downloads. What am I? And I put out a newsletter a couple of weeks ago that said, okay, what happens when you get them? Like, what are you going to do with that? What is the end goal? And you kind of need to. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. Stephen Covey has a great book. It's an old book, but it's a good book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he says, start with the end in mind so that you don't go 3 years in the wrong direction, and then go, oh, I really wanted to, position myself as an authority. I'm like, well, then maybe doing an interview show isn't the best way to go. And we do have, if you have these, Danny's like, oh, great, I get to go to work. But look, I work for Libsyn. Danny works for Captivate. I have no problem. We're just here as podcast people. So there's, I love them both. But DR says, one of my clients is on Captivate, and I love working with it. But can you talk about features that are underutilized that people might not know about?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple, because obviously I don't want this to become a Captivate promo on your show, mate.
No, again, I'm fine with it, so go right ahead.
I would say one of the most underused is dynamic show notes. They're awesome. You can create a template, a default template that loads every time you publish a new episode. You've got dynamic blocks and shortcodes that you can change up. So if you've got a guest on that's regular and they're on 100 episodes and they change their job to a new job, Dave, at Libsyn, anything like that, and you've got an old bio there, you can just go in and update the shortcode, and that'll change all the details on every single episode that shortcode's added to. That's a great time saver from an episode planning point of view. And then probably the attribution links, I would use that if you're promoting your podcast. We have a feature called attribution links. Basically, you can create nice, simple shortcodes. You can use it either in your show notes or as an audio call to action, and we'll track every time that's typed into a browser or clicked from the show notes, and it'll give you a really good idea which promos are working, which isn't. Does the audio CTA work better than the show notes CTA, all that stuff. But we've also got an awesome playlist over on YouTube called Live. Go to the Live tab on our YouTube channel, and I did a bunch of Captivate Secret Hack live streams last summer that shows you some of the stuff that you might not know you can do there, but now you do. So that'd be a good place to start as well.
The one that I thought was like, ooh, this is cool, was for a while I was doing a show about Akron, Ohio. And so I would go out and find stories, and there's a Chrome extension that you can add. And you basically like, I'm going to use this in the future. So if I found a story someplace, I'd be like, here, add this to, I think it's the show planner. I forget what the actual term of it is, but you basically can say, save this. And then later, as I'm making the show and I talked about those stories, I could easily put them into the show notes. And I was like, somebody's using their noodle over there. That was really useful. So I know every time I hear Mark talk about how they come up with features, he's like, we're either going to save you time or help you make some money. And I was like, that's pretty much the criteria that people are looking for. Yep. So, but yeah, it's if you haven't used it, here, go to supporttheshow.com/Captivate. That's my Captivate affiliate, which they also have. And it's a fun, you guys doing some good stuff over there. I appreciate it. Thank you. Another question here from Ralph says, with many of us adding video output, do you use Captivate, or do you see Captivate adding a place where we can place your link for our YouTube or Rumble upcoming episode? It allows you to use your website. Well, you guys just added something with YouTube. How does that actually work? Because I see we're in an episode, you can add a link to your YouTube. So what happens when you do that?
Yeah, so that's using the alternate enclosure tag, podcasting 2.0 tag. And basically, if you got a YouTube video and you grab that link and you add it when you're creating your episode, there's a little link under the marketing section for your episode. You drop that link in there. That will appear if you use the Captivate website or the WordPress plugin Sync. I believe it works now on the Sync. We updated that, I think. The video will appear embedded on your website for that episode, or it will appear on the player as a video option. And if you click, that will show related videos from your channels. I think Ralph's asking about if you're scheduling it, and I don't think currently, I know we pushed a fix out yesterday that might address that, but currently the video has to be public, to appear on the site. But I think we're either pushed one out or pushing one out to support the scheduled link and preview, etc. Because it'd be cool to see if this would work. If I got the link for this video now and posted it to my episode page, it'd be cool to see if this would actually stream. I believe it would. I'll have to test that. Yeah,
we'll have to play with that. But yeah, and what would be interesting, I'll have to ask Brendan, because I know Ralph uses Podpage, and Podpage has a thing where you can put a link to the video. And so it'd be interesting to see, because I'm assuming, we're getting so nerdy, I love this. The YouTube link, does that actually end up in the feed then? Because you said it's part of the alternate enclosures.
It does, yeah. So the tag will be pushed through on each episode. It's got the video link in it. It'll say alternate enclosure tag is being used. So if you're using a podcast app like True Fans that Sam owns, Sam Sethi, or I think Podcast Guru does it as well, maybe. There's a few apps that support the alternate enclosure. So that will allow you to either choose from the video or the audio version, whatever you want to play back on these particular apps.
Yeah. So in theory, if the link's there, you would think Brendan, said the guy who's never done a bit of coding in his life, it should be easy to just pull that out of there.
Pick it up.
Put it in there. Yeah. Chris Stone from castahead.net. Big Captivate fan. Been using it for years, and I love the consistent and valuable improvements. Yeah, it's good stuff. And
Thanks,
Ralph says it does not work with Podpage, so I have to manually add it each day. Yeah, there are going to be some things. It's hard to have every host working away. Now you would think because of RSS, they kind of should, but like I know, like Podpage will, like if you put an SRT file in for your transcript, well, Podpage will pull that file, which isn't made for people. The SRT file is made for apps. And so when you look at your transcript on Podpage, you're like, well, I just go, so I know now, I download the SRT and then I download the actual like human reading transcript. And the cool thing about Podpage is if you wait, 2 minutes and refresh once you've published and it's in your feed, it'll pick up that new episode, and then I just copy and paste it. So yeah, it's just one of those things. We would love to have everything just automated, but there's always going to be a copy and paste probably in there somewhere occasionally. So, it is what it is.
Because it's RSS and not a lot of, I don't know if Brendan, I guess Brendan must support the podcast and 2.0 stuff, because you've got transcripts get pulled through.
Yeah, he's supporting a lot of stuff now that's actually pretty cool. So, and here we go. He says, Podpage does pull in a YouTube playlist. Yeah, if you want to, you put in your playlist and it will just make a post about videos. So you can have a link on your website. So if people want to watch your YouTube stuff,
No,
doesn't
nice.
put it into the episode, but yeah, it's, and what's fun for me is I just have one YouTube channel, but I have multiple shows about podcasting. And so I just gave it the playlist, and all my videos end up on every channel or every website that way. So it's pretty handy.
Big fan of Podpage. We often send podcasters over there that need more than what the free site offers. So obviously they want videos, they want, reviews pages, etc. So yeah, love what Brennan's doing at Podpage.
Yeah, Captivate actually has, for me, because I know you make it really easy to integrate with email. So that's kind of cool, because most of them, whether it's Buzzsprout or Libsyn or whoever, usually the built-in one is a great place to listen and follow the show. And if you want to go above that, that's not really what it's designed for. But they're all handy. And and Ralph says, "I want it all. Come on, man!" And I want it now. There's a great Queen song that.
FedEx, yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I thought I would ask you about, because I heard about it today, I was listening to Pod News Weekly, and they were talking about this new Spotify video thing, which I've not played with yet. I've heard about it, and then they said, well, so-and-so played with it, and Danny Brown from Captivate was playing with it. And I said, oh, good. I'm going to ask Danny Brown from Captivate. So from what I understand, well, I'll let you just tell it, and then I'll ask questions.
Yeah, so I mean, Spotify's supported video podcasts for the longest time, but you had to host with Spotify for podcasters, or have a host that supports video podcasts. So now Blueberry supports it, I think. Does Libsyn or Buzzsprout support video, I think?
We do. Podbean does. Buzzsprout doesn't. You guys, I think, don't at this point.
We don't, no. So I think it's you main three, right? So Blueberry, Libsyn, and Podbean are the big three that support it. Yeah, so obviously you could push video out to YouTube, and I believe Spotify through the RSS feed as well. But for anybody that didn't host with Spotify, you couldn't push video to Spotify. And what they released, it looked like a soft release. I know James spoke about it last summer, I believe he said, or even just at the end of the year, about 6 months ago, that Spotify now let anybody add video. But I think they've now actually released it to everybody. And I just found it by accident. I was actually logging into Spotify for Podcasters to look at analytics for another video I was meant to be doing that time. And a pop-up said, hey, you can now add video, and here's how you do it. And it's really easy to do. If you've got a YouTube video or your own video that you upload to YouTube, when you're in your Spotify for Podcasters dashboard, as a podcaster that doesn't host with them, because they call their hosting company the same thing, which is really confusing. But if you're a podcaster and you log into Spotify for Podcasters, next to every episode now you've got 3 little dots. You click that says upload video. So you can upload an MP4 video there, and then that will play back on Spotify. There are a couple of caveats, and I know James, and I'm sure you'll talk about it, Dave. I know James is very particular about this, is the issue seems to be that when you do that, it essentially nukes the RSS audio for that episode, because they'll default to the video option. And then if you do have on your Spotify app, if you have it toggled to only play video if you're Wi-Fi connected, that's the only time you'll play video. If you're not playing video, they'll use the audio from the video. So the analytics for that particular episode won't be pushed back to whoever you host with. So that's a bit of a naughty move by Spotify, I think.
Yeah, that's when I was like, wait a minute.
Spotify way.
Well, they like to do things because, well, we're going to do this and it'll work in Spotify. And then you're like, yeah, but what about other places and such? And were you at the pod show in London?
I wasn't. No, I was at the podcast movement, which I made where I caught up with you last year in August in Denver, but I wasn't in London, no.
Because I've heard about their booth, and then James said that they had this big open booth, but yet you would go in there and they're like, no, this is appointment only. And I was like, that sounds like somebody making fun of Spotify. Why would you do that? It's a walled garden. Yeah. The other thing I always like to point out, and this is just me, so it's a survey of one, but it dawned on me, I looked at it, that I've had 13 episodes of Ask the Podcast Coach video on Spotify now for a year, because I went down and looked at, I don't know if it's in this screenshot, but it was something like a really decent title, and it had you can see most of these have 0 plays. And so as much as people are like, ooh, Spotify on, video on Spotify, I don't want to poo it because that's just me. And I know some of my shows do absolutely horrible on Spotify. And then others, like Podcast Rodeo Show, always has a decent Spotify kind of audience. But my other shows just don't. I don't know if that applied to more of a younger audience or something. Who knows? But yeah, to me, so I saw that as, okay, so let's say it's my Ask the Podcast Coach. My audience is used to getting audio, and then all of a sudden they don't get a choice for audio anymore. It's like, oh, you're going to get the video. And if they have their podcast app set to download the episode, I'm assuming it's then going to download the video. I guess on Spotify doesn't, because we're only talking about Spotify. And I don't think Spotify has a download, like automatically download episodes feature.
I think it does actually, mate. I think they changed that. I think so. Don't quote me. I think on the app, on your phone app anyway, and it might be Android. I'm on Android. I don't know if it's the same. On iOS, it might be different. I think on Android, you can have the option to download automatically, but you also have to toggle. So in your app settings, you have to toggle if you want to watch video, and if you do, how you access it. So
interesting.
If it's only on Wi-Fi, and then only download if you don't want to download the video version, only download the audio version. But the problem goes back to, if they're pulling the audio from the video version, you're going to be downloading the video audio. So it's fine for the end user. The listeners don't care how the content comes in. But for us podcasters, if we're trying to keep the analytics in one place as much as possible, obviously if you've got a big show on Spotify, Spotify is not even my top 10 for app listenings. So I don't care. But I know if people's got a big audience on Spotify, and that's going to start impacting what they see on their host side, then that's going to be an issue, obviously.
Yeah. And if you're doing anything, if you're not doing if you're selling ads and it's not per episode, and you need to know your download numbers so you can know what to charge your advertiser, you just added another place to come check your stats. And I'm like, ugh. So that's where I know Ralph was there in the chat room, and he's on Rumble, he's on YouTube, and he's on Captivate. And so we always have to kind of, anytime we talk about growth, we're like, well, we got to go look at all these places now, because even if the audio isn't going up the way we want, what are these other places going? I think it was Kevin Schmidlin from Grow the Show said that he was telling people, like, go look at your X account and go look at Threads and go look at all your social. Because a lot of times if we just look at, the podcast, maybe the podcast is growing slow while your newsletter is, taking off and going crazy. So you never know.
Exactly. And we are, as podcasters, we are kind of used to accessing multiple areas for audience information. But a lot of the time, like you say, we might not be thinking, to look at the newsletter, to look at the social audience and include that in your sponsor packages.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the other thing, while you're here, how many podcasts, this is so fun. I get to ask this to somebody else because I get this all the time. How many podcasts do you actually have right now?
So if you go to I don't do it now because obviously we're in the live stream, but if you go to the link in my name there, that has all my current and past podcasts. So I've got podcasts that I've archived. They're still live, but I'm not updating them. So I think at the last count, I've probably got between 10 and 15. I don't know.
There you go. Yeah. So
like pretty active currently.
Yeah. So it sounds like PodChat was something that came and went. So how did you know, it's time to do something else? Like how, that's one of those questions I always get, like, how do you know when it's time to, throw in the microphone on something?
For me, it was lack of enjoyment, I think. I loved the PodChat show. That was fun. It was like a sort of interview show, bringing podcasters on, talking about specific topics in the industry. So we speak about diversity. I had Elsie Escobar on from Libsyn talking about diversity in podcasting. It was a great episode. So I really enjoyed the topics, but the enjoyment and putting it together, and whether I was still enjoying it or whether I felt I was now starting to run out of ideas and just post the episode or mail it in, etc. I never want to get to that stage when I'm just mailing it in. So I sunsetted it and continued. Like my main one that's been going for the longest now is the 1 minute podcast tips one, because that's simple. It's, as the show title suggests, it's really short episodes, really easy to put together. So it's mainly for enjoyment, mate, whether I still enjoy doing it or not.
Yeah. Do you find it harder to do a shorter show?
I don't. I think the hardest thing is maybe trying to get topics to discuss. And I do a lot of what you do, where you're on Reddit and you'll find questions, for this show or for your own show, etc. So I'll try to look at Reddit or questions that have come into Captivate support maybe, and do an episode around that. So that's the hardest thing I find for the really short one.
Yeah. We got another question from the chat room. This is from Rich Graham. Rich Graham, by the way, thank you for the Radar suggestion. Radar is this tool if you want to have all your social media under kind of one umbrella. I saw that in the chat room, so thanks for that, Rich. But he says, do you guys have any podcasting newsletter hosting recommendations? And so for me, it's weird. I use Substack just because I like to play with stuff. And they do a lot of cross-promotion to where I see more growth on that platform, but they're in a way, they're not like they're not supposed to be a marketing kind of newsletter. It's supposed to be, I don't know if you're supposed to sit back and pontificate about whatever it is your topic is, but I still throw in a couple calls to action. I just started, I like MailerLite if you're on a budget. All these have free stuff. And then I just started playing with ConvertKit again. I actually went in because I had gone through, I moved everybody from ConvertKit, that's what I used to use, to Substack. And then I started a new podcast. And I was like, well, I want to set it up so that when an episode goes out, it automatically sends out an email. And I was like, oh, you can do that in ConvertKit. And I was like, all right. So I basically wiped my ConvertKit clean because I was at the point where I had to pay for it. Then I was like, all right, I'm back to no subscribers. And I put up a form like that. But do you have any particular favorites?
I'm pretty similar to you. I use Substack. I don't really use it for the podcast as such. I find it a bit limited from a podcasting point of view, only because I find the embed support's limited. You can only really drop YouTube, Apple, or Spotify in there, which kind of limits it a little bit. But I love like you said, I love the network and the community. I get a lot of new subscribers from recommendations from your newsletter, for example, Dave, and from Tony Doe, who does the Into the Podverse newsletter. So I think the recommendation engine is really good. I do like Aweber from the point of view that I've not used it for a while, but they used to have, and they probably still do, they had like a smart content option. So basically it's a box you can drag across into your template, and that allows you to drop an RSS feed in there. And then when you publish a new episode, the smart content box will update with that. You can choose to embed it in your newsletter. And then any newsletter providers that support media playback, you can watch it or listen to it directly, from your email inbox. So that's a nice little feature for podcasters.
Yeah, Aweber is, for me, anytime you're thinking of switching to a different service, and usually it's for money reasons or whatever, but make sure whatever bright, shiny thing that the other newsletter has, make sure you're going to use it. Because I remember I moved from Aweber, which I'd had forever, and then I think I heard about ConvertKit on Pat Flynn's show, and it just sounded so just darn sexy. I'm like, oh, I got to go over there. And I made the world's worst mistake. Because they would download your file as a zip file. So I had a bunch of different lists. So I'm uploading them to ConvertKit, and everything was fine. And I downloaded my biggest list and then deleted my account. And they're like, hey, like when you delete your account, we're wiping off everything. And I was like, no, I know, because I'd already uploaded all my old lists. I had this last big one that I just downloaded, and I was like, no, well, I'm leaving here. We'll see you later. And the downloaded corrupted on the way down. And I lost my biggest list. And I was like, so if you move, don't close the door on the old one until you see your email list in the new one. I was like, it was like probably 12,000 people. I was like,
oh man.
Yeah, it hurt. I'd been working on that thing, and I went back and I'm like, hey, and they're like, yeah, remember that pop-up that says, we're going to delete this? And I'm like, there's no backup of a backup of, and they're like, nope, that's kind of why that message is there, buddy. And I was like,
nobody reads the pop-ups.
Yeah. Jeff C says, I really love and recommend the feature they have on ConvertKit now. You can actually make money by recommending other newsletters. Here's something nice. I didn't know, because I don't know about you, but like the actual search engine, Google, I'm finding less and less useful, because the first 60 to 70% of it is ads, and that's if they don't throw some sort of AI junk at the top of it. And a friend of mine said, oh, I switched to Bing years ago. And he goes, I'm not going to retire on it, but they actually pay you to use Bing. They give you points, and then you can cash in your points for an Amazon card. And I was like, I did not know that. So I've been using Bing. And
so now you're Bing.
Well, it's funny because it actually looks like a search engine. Like you type in stuff and it gives you links to websites. And I was like, yes, this is what I used to do. Because Google, it just seems like everything, it's so
It's
bad.
bloated now as well.
Yeah.
Chrome's really bloated, So yeah, I will check that out. The thing that put me off a little bit about Bing was, and I might be thinking in the wrong one. I might be thinking of Edge actually. That's browser.
Yeah.
I was thinking there's one of them that uses a lot of AI stuff. I think it's Edge maybe, but I'll check out Bing because like you, I'm so tired of all the ads and the crud all above the fold on Google results now.
Yeah, and the people also asked, I'm like, can I just get my own results that, I kind of, because that's how Google won the search wars, man. Back in the days of Alta Vista and that, they got you quick results and they were good. And now it's like, I can't find the results and what I'm looking at is horrible. And it's like, ugh. So it's, right now, I was trying to find a subject of doctors who are men of science who also happen to be somewhat religious. And I'm coming up with a whole lot I found some stuff, but it took a while. And I was like, this is not how it used to be. So Danny, are you much of an AppSumo guy?
I've used it. I've got, funny enough, I bought, I think, a tool called Optinly from AppSumo, which is a really cool marketing tool that you can use for newsletters, podcasts, etc. I've used it in the past. I haven't used it a lot, to be honest. But yeah, I know of AppSumo. Yeah.
Yeah, because DR says AppSumo days. So it was kind of like their, I don't know, Black Friday or whatever, whatever, insert that, just ended. Did you pick up anything? Because I have an AppSumo addiction. And the thing, she said, I got Press Ranger and Big VU. I think I got Big VU a while ago, which is a video editor. The thing that is kind of, and I say this phrase a lot, and honest, I swear it's true, but I'm not anti-AI, but it just seems like everybody is leading with that. Like here, it's this and this with it's an AI tool that does this. And it's in the end, everything's looking like everything else. Like, okay, but what's... Yeah. I'm like, so every time I look at, when I go over there, there's just nothing really, that strikes my fancy. It's like, oh, it's going to do this and transcribe and give you, I'm like, yeah, I already got 10 of those. And, I only use maybe one, if any. So it's just, it is what it is. But I actually, speaking of AppSumo, if you go to yourpodcastwebsite.com, I just did an episode on how things you should do before buying things on AppSumo. Because I haven't been burned a lot. That's the one thing I really like about it is the fact that you do have a 30-day, I think it might even be 60-day.
I think so, yeah.
So if you buy something I know I bought something and I thought it did this, and within 10 minutes of using it, I was like, oh, this is not what I thought it was. And so I was like, ick. So, and I just went and said, hey, you guys have yep. And they're like, yeah, well, and it took them the better part of a week to get it back to me. But in the end, I didn't have to pay for it. So,
this is not Temu.
Yeah,
Temu.
Well, yeah, that's what's interesting about that is I bought a pair of shoes. Like I wouldn't buy shoes anywhere. I have to put them on my feet before I buy them. But I bought a pair of shoes and it was they were not great, but it was like, well, it was $5, something like that. I was like, well, but I'm like, lighting $5 here, lighting another $5 on fire after a while. And I've always heard that if you're buying any electronics from that particular website, like buyer beware, it's not great. But I do want to say thanks to Ralph from Ask Ralph. He's making it rain over here. Thank you for the super chat. And I hit the wrong button. I hit the subscribe button. I wanted to make it rain like this. There we go. Thank you, Ralph. I appreciate that, buddy. So let me head on. Tell you what, how are we doing on time? It's 11 o'clock. Let's get this out of the way. I want to say thank you to all of our awesome supporters. And Danny, that's right, you're going to be here for the Wheel of Names. That's great fun. Yeah. So the show is brought to you by the School of Podcasting, where I offer step-by-step coaches. Well, see, if this was a real podcast, I would edit that out and do it again. But step-by-step courses, and of course, unlimited coaching and a really awesome community. If you want to check it out, use the coupon code COACH. And speaking of money-back guarantees, that comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. And also, this particular podcast runs on Podpage. If you want to try Podpage, it's super simple. That's my affiliate link. Go to trypodpage.com. Or if you want to learn Podpage, go to learnpodpage.com. That's a free course. And right now, we are running on Ecamm. If you want to check that out, you have to be on a Mac to use that. just go to askthepodcastcoach.com/ecam, and ecam is spelled with 2 M's because it's that good. And Jim is out on special assignment this week. He'll be talking about that next week. But if you like, Jim Cullison, well, just go over to theaverageguy.tv. And of course, if you want to check out more Danny Brown, just go to DannyPod.com. That's an easy one to remember. And yes, it's time to find our featured supporter of the week. So Danny, we go over to the Wheel of Names. And so these are people that have, on my Patreon, have provided $20 of support, and we really appreciate that. So who will it be? Will it be, will they go 2 in a row, the ladies from Keep the Flame Alive, or will it be AI Goes to College, or will it be Ask Ralph podcast? We'll find out as we spin the Wheel of Names. And this week's awesome supporter is, it was almost Ralph. It is Shane Whaley from Radio GDR. If you're into, I always forget, this is where I'm a stupid American and I don't know anything. When it comes to especially countries, GDR is either East or West Germany. And it was the one that used to be like Nazis. So it's all about exploring that side of Germany. And I'm like, yeah, it's that. So if you're into Germany and culture and that whole 9 yards, Shane does an awesome job. And I'll put a link to that out in the show notes. But Shane, thank you so much. Shane, of course, from Tourpreneur. He's a seasoned podcast veteran, but thanks for your support. We deeply appreciate that. And if I get my mouse to work, or seriously, there we go. If this podcast has saved you time, saved you money, saved you headaches, well then, and it's helped you, stay educated, then you too can be an awesome supporter by going to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And I did see one I wanted to bring up. I felt bad when I saw this. I was like, but it's just not the time, at least for me. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. This guy said, look, I'm working 2 jobs and I want to start a podcast. And then he said, hi all, I'm in not just debt, I'm in crushing debt. Right now, due to some special circumstances, that stinks. I'm working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. That makes me tired just thinking about that. He says, just to scrape by. I have a great podcast idea, and I want to start recording. I have a computer. I have a decent mic. What software would you recommend and why? I don't have a lot of time for editing, and obviously my funds are nearly non-existent. Thanks for your time. And so I politely told the guy, look, there's a difference between being poor and broke. And as someone who went through bankruptcy, I understand being broke. And I just said, I wouldn't do it at this time. I'm like, it's, if you're really, trying to make money quickly, I don't know if podcasting is the way to go. I know Captivate you guys just added the feature. You can have your own Patreon kind of now with Captivate, which is kind of cool. Have you seen a lot of people, using that feature?
We have, yeah. I mean, we saw the stuff in the back end, and it's been picked up really well. And people are using it really smartly. They're like doing free trials, and they tie it to Apple subscriptions through delegated delivery and all that cool stuff. So you can send it out to multiple places. So yeah, it's been good to watch that being picked up and how people are using it. I use it myself. It's super easy to use.
Yeah, but if somebody says, how long does it take to make money with a podcast, do you have a standard answer?
I don't, because I think I hate saying it depends, but I think in this case, it depends. Because you can make money out the gate. You can have like a solid plan of a podcast that's very niche and hyper local, and you can talk to local businesses right from the start and say, hey, these are my target audience. It's going to be, we have a podcaster, Bob Williams, over in Sarasota, and he does a podcast very much geared towards the Sarasota community. So that's ultra niche, ultra local. And so he can monetize right away with local sponsors. Doesn't have to worry about ads, doesn't have to worry about getting 100,000 downloads or 20, 30, 40, 50,000 downloads per episode, because he's got that hyper local sponsorship. So you can make it right out the gate. And people can just donate. They can like Ralph just did now for $25, so we can support a show out the gate for no other reason that they enjoy the content. I think if you're looking for ads, then yeah, that's a long-term game, because you do need, sadly, the downloads and the audience for advertising. So you do need it then. So I think, I'm sorry, I'm just going with the generic, it depends.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing, you mentioned the dynamic show notes. You could have a local sponsor And when their ad runs in your show, their, information will be in the show notes. And then if they bought, 3 months worth of sponsorship and their sponsorship ends, you just swap out the ad and the new person is then shown in your show notes. So that's actually, the dynamic show notes is a really cool thing. Randy says, crushing debt and 2 jobs and hoping to make money, just don't do a podcast. I said, it's not never do a podcast. I just wouldn't do it now.
Not right now, yeah.
Because especially when you're in that situation and you're really just counting every penny, if you have a family, and we don't know in this case, but if you have a family, they're stressed out too. And now would be the time to hang out with the family and, I don't know, go to the library, do something for free, and be better use of your time. So,
well, I think as well, you mentioned there, he said, he laid out what he can do, and he said he doesn't really have time to edit. So to me as well, that's going to be not a red flag because you don't have to edit. I always recommend editing just to tighten your show up. I know some podcasters don't, and it still sound great. So you don't have to. But if he's trying to make money from the podcast to try get out of debt and he's not editing, then the quality is probably not going to be quite there, which might put people off. So if you're putting people off from the quality of the content, you're going to struggle a bit to make money from it. So it seems like there's a lot going against them to launch a podcast at the minute.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's just not now, but not so much never do a podcast, but this may not be the time to do that. Plus, the other thing I find at least is if somebody's really wanting to make money and they're on episode 4, and it sounds like they're on episode 4, they're kind of not very confident behind the mic and et cetera, well, that just adds more pressure because also you're not very efficient at it maybe, right? You're going through all the learning curves. So things are taking longer than you want and things of that nature. And so the added pressure of, I'm trying to make money and I'm not, that can just take your attitude and throw it right out the window. So I know earlier we were talking about video. I should have brought this up then, but you had a post that you said, don't be the podcaster. When I read this, I'm like, oh, is that me? Don't be the podcaster who poo-poos one format over the other. If you prefer audio, awesome. If you prefer video, that's just as sweet. But we're all creators. We should be supporting each other, not putting each other down. That's enough people that will do. There's enough people that will do that without us helping them. So, can you give us an example of that?
You see it like when someone's. I'm not an OG podcaster. I didn't start in 2000, 2001, 2002, and often you'll see some people. And some podcasters will say, well, if it's not got an RSS feed, it's not a podcast. If it's on YouTube, it's not a podcast. If it's XYZ, it's not a podcast. And you'll see newer podcasters do just the same. Well, what do you know? Blah, blah, blah. You're out of date, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I feel that there's so much opportunity out there anyway, regardless whether you do audio podcasts, regardless whether you do YouTube. You're not in competition with each other. You might have the same show, the same topics, the same niche, but you're not really in competition because there's always going to be an audience, right? Let's for argument's sake, there's 4 million podcasts, but there's only about 500,000 active podcasts would be great. All the monies, all the listeners. There's only about 500,000 active podcasts. So the audience that you're going up against is very small. And I feel that there's people that think you're a nerd for being a podcaster. There's people that think you're an idiot, you're immature for still doing podcasts when you're in your 40s and 50s and upwards, etc. I feel that as creators, we know what it takes to create something and all the work that goes into it and all the times you have to stay up late at night or give up weekends to edit, to record, to research and that. Why do we put people down because they choose to do a different format, and why is their format wrong compared to yours? So that's really where it came from. I think I may have heard some people discuss it on a podcast episode and it just stuck in my head. I thought, come on, this is like 2024. We're still going through this. It's like the video game and the Star Wars fandoms. It's like I'm an OG Star Wars fan from back in 78 when it first came into the cinema.
Yeah.
But I don't care if you like the new stuff and you prefer the old stuff or whatever. It's enjoy what you enjoy and let everyone else enjoy what they enjoy.
Yeah. Yep. I basically just explain what everything is. I try not to poo-poo it. I'm like, okay, a video podcast on Spotify only goes to Spotify. A video podcast, and I really want to put up quotation marks, but I won't. A video podcast on YouTube only goes to YouTube and YouTube Music. And then if you have a video podcast on a host, well, that goes to about 15 different apps. So, but yeah, you brought up the, however many active podcasts we have. I actually saw this from Rob Walsh on his X account. And some business or whatever has this big giant banner and it says, we do this not because it's easy, but because we thought it would be easy. And I was like, that's a lot of us, because he said of the 2.6 million podcasts. So this might be an old tweet because we haven't had 2.6 million podcasts in a while. But he just said over 390,000 have released a new episode in the last 90 days. And of those have 10 or more episodes. So he goes, there are really only 1.1 million that have never made it past 5 episodes. Do you guys, I don't know if you ever look at that. Is that a stat that you see over at Captivate as well? People just boo out before they get to, 10?
We don't really look at, obviously we'll look at the analytics in the back end and stuff, but we don't really look at because I feel with Captivate, we go after a very specific type of podcaster. Mark, the co-founder and CEO of Captivate, he's always saying that for Captivate, we only want to work with serious podcasters. And serious can be, what you define as serious. Is it serious about growing your podcast, marketing, editing, record, whatever you class as being a serious podcaster? So that's why we don't have a free plan, for example, because we feel with a free plan, nothing wrong with free podcasting, but you might not be quite as invested as if you're paying a podcast host, whatever their plans are. So we have a very specific audience. So we tend to find because of that, they're more invested in trying to make it work and using the tools and the resources and educational stuff like you've got, Dave, to grow and to be better and become better. So we don't find as much pod feed maybe. But yeah, we had an episode of the In and Around podcasting show that I co-host with Mark, and you've been on that. We had an episode talking about the stat that came out, and it might have been Rob or it might have been Kevin over at Buzzsprout possibly. Someone posted that the average episode length, or the episodes now before someone quits, is 7 episodes. It used to be 6 or it used to be 5.
Yeah.
It's now 7. So it's going up, so that's good. But we looked at why that happens. And a lot of it goes back to one of the things that we mentioned earlier. You were on about planning ahead, and that question that got asked in Reddit about, okay, I've done this, now what? Well, you have to have an answer to that, now what, to get past that pod fade, because otherwise you're just going to stop. So we don't really look at that information, but I guess we could probably look at it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, some people just get into it for fun. And like you said, I always hear Mark say that we're for the serious podcaster. And I like that idea. I think I wasn't disheartened. I set up a new service called Podcast Hot Seat and sent out to the newsletter, things like that. And I was like, this could really just do nothing, because I'm not positive people want feedback on their show. They say they want to grow their show. And I was like, I even had an episode where I explained 2 times where I just missed stuff on my own show that I just didn't see it because it's my show and I'm too close. And so I opened up the door, sent out a couple emails, promoted on a bunch of shows, and got a whole lot of nothing. And I was like, well, all right. So I was ecstatic last night. I had somebody sign up, but I was like, this might just be a case where nobody knows what it was because there wasn't, there's nobody to look at. It's like, I remember the very first season, this is going back, of The Real World on MTV. That first season was the best season because they had no idea what they were getting into. The second season, everybody knew, I'm going to get filmed and I have to watch what I say and this and that. So the fact, I think, that there wasn't one to look at and go, but what is this guy going to do with my podcast when I give it to him? So I was Stephanie Graham is who signed up last night. So I thought that was cool. So yeah, Coach Dave says barriers to entry are low and change is never ending. Yeah, that is true. With podcasting, we're talking about different technology today and Spotify. It's always, trying to keep up with what's going on. And then Matthew Passy says podcasts don't need gatekeepers. It's supported to be open to everyone in any format. Yeah, absolutely. And then to the guy that had the 2 jobs, SP says, if you don't have time to promote and market your show, that's it. Anytime somebody says, I had somebody at the School of Podcasting this week, and they were going to start a second show. And I go, okay, first things first, can you put the content you're doing in your second show in your first show? Does it fit? And they're like, not really, because we have a show, it's about 10 minutes, and this is going to be interviews, and they're going to be long form. I'm like, okay. I said, just keep in mind, Ariel, because she always says in Twitter, it's like this and that.
Listen, Black?
Listen,
that's like you. This and that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But she was on. You guys did the one of my favorite segments of your show is Stupid Things in Podcasting, and I actually asked Mark. I go, can I play the last episode had a montage of Stupid Things in Podcasting? I said, can I play that in my show? Because my next show is about sharing your attitude and your opinions. And one of them, because I looked into YouTube, and one of the formats that I just do not understand, and I was like, why is this popular, are reaction videos.
Yeah.
Why do I need to watch you react to this music? How about I'll just go to Spotify and play that song and I'll react to it myself. I don't really need your reaction. And so a friend of mine kind of gave me a different slant on it. And I was like, okay. And so one of the things when I heard this from Stupid Things and like everything everybody said, I agreed with. So I think that's what reaction videos are. But Ariel said something about when you start a YouTube channel and you start this and you start that, it's funny, she goes, because you're using YouTube to market the audio version. She goes, but then you forget you have to market the YouTube, so it will then market. Like every time you add something new, how are you going to make YouTube grow? Because the YouTube thing is supposed to be the thing that makes the audio grow. And I thought that was great, just a way of that. So you'll be hearing, well, I guess you won't be hearing you. You'll be hearing about you and Mark in that show on that.
That was a good collection. I enjoyed that roundup.
Yeah. Everyone that came up, I was like, yes. And then the next, like, yes. So that's what reaction videos do. They make you go, yeah, this is why I listen to this show. I had one time, I'm trying to remember what I ranted about. People saying that it's too hard, and we'll talk about this in a second about downloads, but they were saying it's too hard for buyers to the people that are selling ads, it's too hard to sell to the buyers and blah, blah, blah. And I did this, what I call a power rant. I'm like, do your job. I go, when we went from newspaper to fax machines, and there used to be ads on faxes, and when we went to email and all these other places, we switched to new technology. You had to learn how to sell to that. And I'm always confused because on one hand, I will hear that podcasts are like one of the top, if not the top form of advertising. Like it outperforms everything. And I'm like, okay, if that's true, how in the world is it hard to sell advertising on a podcast? Because that's right there. Hey, Mr. Business Person, do you advertise on radio? Yeah, we do a little. What about newspapers? Yeah, we used to. Okay, well, guess what? This outperforms all. Like, how is it hard? And so I did this giant rant, and somebody, I saw them it must have been right before I went to Podfest or something, and I saw somebody in the hall, and they're like, dude, I loved your episode. And I go, really? I was it wasn't my typical thing. They're like, and they said, no, it's that's the reason why I follow you. I want a guy with that kind of passion and that kind of that. So when I heard that Stupid Things in Podcasting, I was like, okay, this is why I'm
that's
listening.
My people.
That's it. Yeah. Oh, here we go. We had somebody, daily sports history. I work 2 jobs and not a lot of time. But I started the podcast to have something I enjoy working on every day. That's the other thing I think I put on Reddit. I said, now, if you need something to mentally get away from the fact that you're up to your armpits in debt, I go, a podcast is for me, sometimes I call it the best $7 therapy there is. Sign up somewhere and do that. So it can actually be something that you do to escape the world. That's awesome. Yeah. Matthew says, if you love daily sports history, then, keep going and people will find it. I saw people fail when it was a chore versus a passion. Yeah. If you don't like doing the show, well, exactly what Danny said earlier. When did he stop? When he didn't enjoy doing it anymore. He's like, okay, I don't like doing this. I'm not going to do it. So it's pretty easy that way. All right, let's move on. Do you love when people obsess over things that they don't need to obsess over? Isn't that always fun?
I understand it. I do. I used to, when I first started podcasting, I'd be in my analytics every day, every hour, refresh, and then crying. So no, I get it, but I also feel that life's too short. I feel that as you get older, you start to realize that more. So there's things that are a bit more meaningful than refreshing your download screen.
Again and again. Yeah, I saw this one and I just thought, but the person says, I ran a podcast for several years on Shout Engine. Nearly 200 episodes were recorded. And this, again, is another free media host that went out of business. Ben lost them when the service site stopped. Finding out later there were no backups, he said, I was really distraught, but eventually made a new podcast on Spotify. So he went from one free media host to another. But as of this week, he says, I was given a miracle by a fellow Redditor who managed, he basically pointed him to the Wayback Machine and was able to get his own download. So his question was, I could just meticulously insert them into my existing podcast, titling them as lost episodes, but I think that would clutter up the current content too much. I was also considering, and that's the one thing I need to see here, my existing podcast. So I'm guessing this is a new podcast. Maybe that's it. I thought it was the same podcast. I thought he just moved and kept going. But he said, I'm just looking for advice on how I should go doing this. Incidentally, I would also like advice on the best way to keep backups on these episodes so this never happens again. They're sitting on an external hard drive right now, but I feel better if they're uploaded somewhere for prosperity. So I was thinking he had just kept the show going, like, okay, Shout Engine shut down his show. He started up the same episode, and now he's kind of like, how do I put in the back episodes? That may not be the case now that I read this for the third time. Because if it's the same show, you can upload stuff and backdate it. And
yeah, exactly. Just go in your episode editing screen, you put the date as January 2, 2019.
Yeah. So if that's the case, that's one where I was like, I think you're overthinking this a bit. That like, oh, what am I going to do with these? And because most apps, I don't know that there are any more set up to download all. I think that might be a button in some apps that you can click, which we love those. You get a giant spike if you've got hundreds of downloads, but I don't think most of them, if you upload them and backdate them, I don't think they'll download them. They're usually looking for the latest one, not the very first one. So that would be that. But as for hard drive or for backing up, this is where I always keep a copy on my hard drive. So that's one. And I know like Hindenburg has a feature that you can directly publish to certain hosts. I think Captivate's in that list. Yeah. And then, but my always worry about that is then you don't have a local copy. Now, granted, you have a copy in the cloud on whoever your host is, but a true backup is when you have one somewhere off-site. Because I know some people are like, well, I've got it on my hard drive, but I also have a second copy on an external hard drive. And I'm like, and when your apartment catches on fire, you lose 2 copies of your files. So you need to have one somewhere off-site. Do you have any kind of, where do you back up your stuff?
Yeah, so I'm similar to you. I'll have the external hard drive and it's portable, so I can pick it up. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to be rushing around trying to find my portable hard drive when there's a fire in the house. It goes back to that thing about, okay, what's important in life? Are you going to be checking your downloads or getting out of the house because it's on fire? Well, give me a minute. Might have got a new listener. But yeah, I've got a portable hard drive. I also use iCloud and Google Drive to just give it a couple of options in case, to your point, does one go away? Does one corrupt? Does one crash? Hopefully, I've still got elsewhere that I can get. And then obviously, you've got your media host, whoever you're hosting with, as long as they're around.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Ray over at Around the Layout podcast, if you're into model trains, that's a really cool show. He goes, overthinking it like me with my new outro. Yeah, it's, throw it on the wall. It usually isn't that. Larry says, if my apartment catches on fire, my podcast is the last thing in I might grab a photo album. That is something, I don't know about you. I have lots of photo albums, and about, 4 or 5 times a year, I go, I need to scan all those and digitize them. And still not happening. Because that would be, if those are gone, there's no backups of those anywhere. So that would be something. But on the other hand, if my life's at stake, sorry, I don't need pictures of me from the 6th grade or whatever. Yeah. But you do need, I know for me, I have my online backup, because there's tons of these places. There's Dropbox and things like that. But there's a service called Backblaze, and they have, which I use for backing up just my hard drive in general. But then they have a second kind of service, and it's made for exactly what I want. Like, I really don't plan on ever touching these files again, but I want them someplace, and it's super cheap. But then they charge you a little more if you download them. And I'm like, well, I plan on never downloading these again. So, but it's part of my process. Once the file's done and everything's there and show notes and all that, I will go in, and you have to FTP it in. So it's not they might have a web-based interface, but I basically fire up CyberDuck and upload the files. And at that point, we're on to the next episode. So it's it. Coach Dave here is talking about podcasting as a business. He says, as a business model can be described as high churn market or low barrier, high competitive industry. It works when it's adjunct to something else, but not as a standalone business. So I could see, I would say that at times podcasting is kind of high churn, depending again on, and again, it depends, right? Why you're doing it, things like that. DR says, I just digitized all my scrapbooks with my mom, my dad, my grandma, and everyone else. I just took an evening while watching TV and scanned every photo. Yeah, I have your typical printer / scanner / microwave / toaster thing in the corner, and I could scan quite a few at a time. So Ralph has another question. He says, I'm looking for someone to improve or create a better intro / outro video for my video show. I did something in Canva, but it looks very amateur. I would point you at castahead.net. Chris Stone is a good video guy. But I also realized that most of the video stuff I watch, I think it's Think Media, because I always think it says Tink and it's Think. But these are these are YouTube guys, and their actual intro is their logo and somebody going, just press record. That's it. Like, it's literally like, today something going to catch your attention, blah, 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 just press record. And then they're into the content. And there was a video I watched and the guy called it STV. And he said it stood for seconds to value. And so mine now, when I do YouTube videos, if I have any intro, it's just my stupid, well, they're not stupid, but I have my little lady saying the School of Podcasting with Dave Jackson. And then I get right to the content. So this is where it gets kind of tough when you have, like, I'm doing a video podcast. You have to kind of figure out, am I doing video or audio first? And if you're doing video first, like, if you wanted to, like, okay, this is going to be audio, but I'm doing video. Well, audio podcasts, like Danny on In and Around Podcasting, you guys have this awesome jingle. And so you need that. It kind of explains what the show's about, who's it for, and then you guys come in and you explain what we're talking about. So you're right to the content, but you have that if you're new to the show part, which we still need in audio, but you don't want that in video. They don't want your jingle and all that. They're like, you have a title there that says how to turn dog poop into gold. And they're like, that's what I want to learn about. And you're telling me all about this stuff, and they don't care. And so YouTube really wants it. So that's where, if you're using Descript, you might have, like, here's everything, including my fun jingle. But when you do the video, cut the jingle out and re-export it. And then, do the first one with everything for audio, cut out the parts that video people don't want, and go that route. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and Todd makes a good point there, Todd DeGator, about YouTube trends and what they're looking for now, or what they seem to be looking for. And that's it. I mean, if you're going to do video podcasting, which is why we always recommend, whether it's myself recommending it to other podcasters, you're recommending it. If you're going to do video, you got to do it properly. You can't just half-ass it, because YouTube is not a forgiving platform for a half-assed attempt at content. So you have to do it properly. And I think that, like you say, I would probably just want to get straight into the content on YouTube, because I've got it on my screen, probably doing other stuff. And then if the content really grabs me, then I'll stop or pause and watch it. But it is playing in the background generally, so I don't want to listen to, blathering on and on, etc.
Yeah. Todd continues. He says, start with a title and a thumbnail, because the thumbnail, from what I understand, is super important, as is the title. And then create your show around it. Your concept, your art, the title, and the script. It might be a little different for, like a talking head live show or whatever, but sure. And I was surprised. I recently subscribed to Mr. Beast because I heard so much about him, and his videos are nuts and they're crazy. But what I'm also noticing is he changes his thumbnail a lot. Like, I remember he had these guys, basically took them out in the middle of nowhere in the woods, and he gave them $10,000 for every day they stayed alive. And so the first one was like him fighting a bear. And then, like, the next day, it was like it was the same video, but he changed the thumbnail. And I'm like, is that a thing now? We have to change. But he's probably testing to see which one works best or whatever. I mean, that guy's always, testing stuff and making these crazy
Well, I think
videos.
if you use something like TubeBuddy, they've got an A/B testing option where you can use different titles and I think different thumbnails, and they'll revolve it for you.
Yeah.
So maybe he's doing something like that, where he's, like you say, he's seeing what works and leaving that one up to try grab the attention.
Yeah.
Funny thing with Mr. Beast, I found this while I was doing a bit of research for one of the episodes on In and Around podcast, and I don't know if it's true or not, maybe it's a little bit hyperbolic, but he said that his episodes cost $5 million to make.
Yeah. Well, the thing, there's one video, if you go to YouTube and type in like, how much does Mr. Beast make? He has this one where this guy's like, hey, if you make this shot, it's a basketball and they're on a court. And it's like, he's way out there. It's almost half court. And this guy makes the shot. And the thing was, if you make this shot, I'll show you what I make on YouTube. And what was funny is he's showing this guy and he's like, okay, this is one of our old channels. We haven't put out a video anywhere. And so I'm only making like 58 million a month. And then this one, but there was one, he said, when this video was going the best, it was X amount of million per hour. And I was like, my brain can't wrap around that. So when he's giving away $10,000 a day, that's like, that's in his couch cushions. And,
yeah, that's pocket change.
and when he's been doing philanthropy, like there's this one video that was really awesome. He made, I think it was 101 wells in Africa, and he's like giving water to like 500,000 people. And at the end, he's like, I know it's kind of stupid that a YouTuber had to do this, but if nobody else is going to do it, like, I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. But yeah, Jeff says, I guess I need to find the second half of my, for growing my YouTube. Yeah, that's it. Todd the Gator, A/B testing is a big deal with large creators. Yep. It's learning an entirely new skill. Yep. And it is. That's, and that kind of goes back to what Danny was saying with, if you're going to do video and you really kind of like when you were talking earlier for the serious podcaster, if you want to be a serious YouTuber, just putting the video, you have to kind of really pay attention to what the algorithm wants and, all these other fun things. And that's where I kind of go, it's a lot of work over there. It's great if you got the time, and the budget and things like that. He says the YouTubers I've interviewed are obsessed with YouTube and spend a lot of their effort optimizing. Yeah, I have a member of the School of Podcasting that does a thing called Shower Thoughts. And it's her talking into a shower head. And it's something like, why do we drive in the parkway and park in the driveway or whatever? What was Captain Hook's name before the accident? Was it Captain Hand? Just those kind of like things. So they're really quick. And she's getting like tons of downloads on this, probably because it's called Shower Thoughts and everybody's hoping they're going to be naughty and they're not. But
looking for the video version.
Yeah. And that's what it is. It's her on YouTube. And when I talk to her, she's spending insane amounts of time now to get this. Now that she's got the traffic, she's got to keep it. And so, yeah.
Well, that's the thing. You make a good point there. I think that sometimes you can fall into that trap as well, where you get some level of success, whatever that looks like. And now you want to keep that bar, but obviously raise it. So now you're thinking, okay, what content should I make as opposed to what content you need to make, right? Yeah. So you sort of get taken away from the content you should be making for your audience. Now you're trying to make content for the traffic, and they're two very different things.
Yeah, I've occasionally I'll hire somebody to kind of check out, and usually they're offering me, I can grow your SEO on your website. I'm like, all right, come on over and look. I'm probably not going to buy anything though. And they're like, that's fine. And there's I don't even know what the number's called, but there's a number, there's a score that shows your SEO, and they'll be like, wow, you're doing pretty good. Like, what are you using? And I go, I write for people. Like when I write my show notes, I write for people, and they're like, oh, okay. Cause this and that, and you blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really, I know I could do all this keyword stuffing and things like that. I just write for people. I'm like, well, it's working. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm probably don't really, I can always, get information from a coach, but sometimes I'm like, yeah, it's not really, that's the case. But this is a good time to bring this one up. I saw this on Reddit, except that's not the one I want to show. I want to show this one about no love from YouTube. He said, YouTube went from giving me hundreds of impressions to my new podcast uploads to almost none. I feel like I made the algorithms mad or something. I usually load the audio version on Spotify because they host my RSS and have YouTube subscribe to the RSS. So this is one of those static video things. He said, I uploaded my videos directly to YouTube the other day as an experiment. I uploaded my video to Spotify hoping it would show up on YouTube via RSS instead. YouTube stopped promoting my podcast feed almost completely. So it's a little confusing there when he says, when I uploaded the video, I'm like, is that a video or a static video, you know? But to me, I forget what podcast I was listening to, and somebody was saying like, I'm just not getting the traction on YouTube because they were uploading static videos. And I'm like, it's a video platform. And while you're giving them something that's better than nothing, there are other, you know, there's 8 bazillion videos a minute uploaded to YouTube. I'm like, yours might not be the top thing. So kind of going back to what you were saying about, you know, every platform's a little different. And then Dan says it makes...
I think his confusion might be... sorry, mate.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think maybe his confusion might be... It sounds like he's uploading video to Spotify for podcasters because he hosts there, so it's been there for a while for him. And he's expecting the RSS feed version to include that video, but clearly it's not. It's just the audio, going back to that audio being pulled from the video. Yeah. Getting stuck up on YouTube is static. So maybe he's expecting Spotify video to go to YouTube as a video, and it's not happening. So obviously his numbers are going to tank if he's stopping uploading to YouTube as well.
Yeah, it's true. And yeah, Dan was saying it makes sense for full-time YouTubers to treat it like a business instead of a hobby. Yeah, because once it gets going, you know, you can make some decent cash over there. It's still, you know, it's a lot of work, but it is what it is. And then the other one I thought we could talk about was somebody was talking about kind of being stuck. And he said, how do I get out of this creative rut? Specifically, if you found yourself having a lack of motivation, or maybe you realize that you've been making content that you don't feel passionate about, how do you go about getting back to your roots and enjoying the process of podcasting again? That's a hard one. It is. I'd been doing my very first podcast I did for 10 years. And it was for musicians. I wasn't in a band anymore. And I'd kind of said all there is to say about it. And I rebranded it. I thought that was going to be the kick in the pants. So I had a jingle made and got new artwork. And I'm like, yeah, this is really, and it didn't do anything. I still hated doing the show. But the other thing, if you're having a hard time coming up with content, I always find like I have RSS readers that go out and read different websites, things like that. But I have found that if I'm not enjoying the content I'm making, or if I'm not as, you know, passionate about it, then what's feeding me, change that. So that's when I'll start listening to audiobooks or something, and I'll be like, oh, this is really cool. I can apply this to that. So I'll change whatever. If I'm not liking what I'm putting out, well, then what's feeding me? Because whatever comes in me goes out of me. And so, I don't know. Have you ever been able to pull yourself out of that rut? Because with that show, the one I talked about, I just ended up killing it. I was like, oh, the reason I don't like doing the show is because I don't like doing the show anymore. My life had changed. But have you ever been able to pull yourself out of that? I don't think I like this show anymore.
I haven't. No, I've tended to just like nix the show. I have sort of like taken an internal look as to why it's happening. And to your point, is it the stuff that's coming in that I'm talking about? Is it topics I'm researching, or the guests I'm bringing on? I'm not feeling that energy with the guests, that kind of stuff, or I'm being a bad host, you know. So I do a lot of internal, not soul searching, but just inquisition or whatever, if you like. And I find that if I can't answer what the issue is, did the format change? Did my love for the topic change? Anything like that? Is it because I'm getting put off by the numbers? Should I be allowing myself to get put off? Whatever it is. But I've basically, if you look, obviously you looked at that, you scroll down the short link that that's in my bio there, you can see all the podcasts that I've archived. And that's because of this exact thing. I got into a funk. I was just maybe putting content out for content's sake, wasn't enjoying it. So I'd rather do something that I really enjoy. And I might not get tens and 20s of thousands of downloads and what have you, and hundreds of thousands of dollars in sponsorship, but I enjoy doing it. And that for me, as a podcaster anyway, that's what makes me sit down, record, and do all the hard work that you do in the back end just to put that 10, 15, 20-minute episode out, or hour long or whatever. So it's hard because, like you say, you don't want to tell people to stop doing what they love. But if they're not loving it, then don't do it. You know?
I'm dying to know, I see where one of your podcasts and you can find this at dannypod.com, stories by AI.
Yeah, that was just an idea I had where this was when I think I started out maybe last year and I probably cancelled it last year. But this was when AI was really getting pushed. And every now and again, or every week it seemed that you'd get a press release, new, innovative AI that does this, that does exactly the same thing that 10 platforms do over here and 20 platforms do over there. But yes, okay, it's innovative. Awesome. So anyhow, I just thought it'd be fun to put in use ChatGPT. I think I used ChatGPT for this, and I've got a disclaimer on each episode that tells you what tool I used.
Right.
And it's basically just write in, give them a prompt, tell me a story about an egg and a fish or something like that. And all I would do, whatever the story is, I wouldn't edit it, I wouldn't change it, I would just read that result. So that would be the story each week, is an episode, a story created by AI, and here it is. I thought it'd be fun, but I got bored of that really quickly because it wasn't fun.
Well, here's my question. Were the stories any good?
You know what? Some were. I mean, they were really short. It was, I mean, they're not big book lengths. They're short. Maybe each episode was 2-3 minutes, I'm thinking. And some were fun. Some were really bad, but I just read it anyway. And I think that's what put me off. I was thinking, I can't do this. You know, I love storytelling. I love creators. I love creative outlets. And I couldn't, with all honesty, continue to do that, knowing that there's so many better humans giving me, you know, more inspiration.
Well, the other thing I saw on your website that you can get to it, it's that the dannypod.com leads to many, it's a lot of doors over there that you can open. And one of them is you have a book called Influence Marketing. How old is that book? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, 11 years old, actually. May 2013 that came out.
Is it, because it's, what's fun is I'm doing the audio version of my book about podcast monetization. It's only 4 years old. And it's interesting because I said, at this time, Apple has 478,000 podcasts in it. And I was like, well, that's 4 million now. Like, so I'm kind of updating as I'm reading the book. Is something like influence marketing, is that a little more evergreen?
And it's funny, when we brought that book out, so I co-authored it with a guy called Sam Fiorella, really good friend of mine over here in Canada. And when we wrote this book, there was a lot of social influence programs like Clout and Cred. I don't know if you remember these when they were around. And we would like just rip into them something fierce because basically they were just putting influence onto how many followers you had. That was it. That was their business model in a nutshell. And that's not influence, that's just reach. All right. So we decided to write a proper business book, really diving into the weeds when it comes to influence marketing and what you have to do and how the end product, the end starting point is the customer, and you work all the way back. You mentioned it earlier, Dave, about starting at the end point and coming back to how you get there. So the book was like really, it's more of like, it's like an educational, really dry book. It's not like an easy read. And a lot of the reviewers said that they appreciate the fact that it was more technical and it wasn't just like fluff, etc. So because of that approach, we see businesses still using the model today, and it's taught. There's a few business schools that use it in the curriculum and teach it, you know, as part of the curriculum. And that, so it was a good book to write. It's fun to see, you know, some people post on LinkedIn now saying what you should do, and that's the stuff that you should have been doing 10 years ago when Clout was still around.
Yeah. I remember Clout with a K. I remember that. Yes. Yeah. Todd the Gator has a fun question. I'm curious how both of you deal with imposter syndrome. Self-doubt creeps in for some of us. It actually creeps in for about 70% of us from what I've seen. Creeps in for some of us on occasion. How do you reset? Danny, you want to go first on this one?
That's a really good question. I think everybody, like you say, 70% at least, I'm going to say higher maybe.
Yeah.
We always doubt. If we look at our numbers and think, well, why is so-and-so over there getting 10 times the downloads? And they're probably not. They're probably just saying that so they appear to be successful. But yeah, you're always going to ask. It's like buyer, remorse. When you buy something, you really wanted it, and then afterwards you're thinking, did I want it? I think it's looking at what you're doing, and is the content being appreciated? And appreciate comes down to different things. You could just have one person giving you really nice feedback where they say, I think, Dave, you shared in a newsletter a few weeks back about a student of the School of Podcast and then a success story that they'd had and how what you had taught them really helped them in their coaching goals. So when you get feedback like that, I think that it's just, as long as you're seeing some kind of traction, as long as you're seeing some kind of feedback and you know that the stuff that you're putting out is the best it can be. I think that's all you can do. You're always going to question yourself, and it's everybody just, and this is a really bad answer, but just acknowledge everybody else is thinking the same as you.
Yeah.
And we're all thinking that we're not good enough. And the fact that you're doing it and you're putting content out means you are good enough, because there's some people want to do it but can't do it. And so you're already above that, and you're already being beyond being an imposter. And that's, I'm sorry, it's a horrible answer. It's not definitive.
No, my favorite, there's a documentary on Netflix of Garth Brooks, and he just was given this like top male performer, blah, 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 multi-platinum thing. This is back when Giuliani was mayor of New York, and he gives him the key to the city. He's going to play Central Park, which is this ginormous field in the middle of New York City. And he's country boy from Nashville or Alabama or wherever he's from. He's like, nobody's going to want to listen to country in New York City. It's the big city. And he's just convinced. And he's in his hotel room, and he's got all the windows are covered. He's like, I don't even want to look out there. And his wife is like, I can't take this anymore, because he's just convinced nobody's going to show up. And so finally, I think it's his road manager or somebody comes in. He's like, Garth, I just was out there, and about 20 minutes ago, they had to move some of the barricades. And he's like, because nobody's coming, right? And he's like, no, Garth, there's 800,000 people out there.
Wow.
And he's like, and Garth goes, wait, you're telling me there's 800,000 people out there? And he goes, no, Garth, I'm telling you there were 800,000 people out there 20 minutes ago. And so by the end of it, there was almost 1 million people, and it was just a sea of people. And he was just convinced. Tom Hanks, Meryl Streep, Sir Brian May of Queen, Aquafina, who's a rapper, Jason Sudeikis, who's Ted Lasso, all these guys have publicly said, Martin Short said he said he still does this. Every time he gets a job and, the movie or the TV show is over, he's convinced he will never work again. And so it's just one of those things, again, kind of going back to, if you love what you do, I know this sounds like a weird humble brag, but one of the things that really messed up my head is when I got inducted into the Hall of Fame, I got back and got in front of the microphone, and I couldn't figure out what to talk about. Because everything was like, was this Hall of Fame material? Was this? And I was like, I can't get this. Like, my head had really changed. And I was like, well, wait a minute. You got this honor by just being yourself. So just shut up and be yourself and do what you always do. And that's kind of what I do. And I think for me, part of it is when I was a teacher, I remember I had to teach, I hated teaching Microsoft Access. It's this horrible database program, and I didn't use it like I used Word and PowerPoint and Excel. Those I used every day. I never used Access. So I was very book smart in Access. But if somebody wanted to go outside of the book, I was going to look really stupid. And I remember going to my boss, because I had to teach an advanced Access class. I go, I really don't think I'm the guy to teach this class. He's like, well, don't you know the material? I go, I can go right through the material. I go, but if somebody wants to color outside the lines, he goes, realize the people that are coming into the class don't know what's in the book. So you already know more than they do. And he's like, so you're fine. He goes, and if they ask a question, just say that's a good question. I'll have to get back to you on that or something like that. So when you're doing stuff and you're doing a podcast, you just have to know this much more than your audience, and you're good to go. And then there are times when you don't. I call those a journey podcast, where you're not the expert, but you're interviewing maybe other people who are, and then the audience gets to follow you through your journey. I remember Joanna Penn does a show called The Creative Pen, and it's cute because her last name is Penn, and I think it's P-E-N. And when she first started, when I interviewed her, probably back in like 2007, and she had no clue like what was going on to be a self-published author. And that was the fun part. She'd started this podcast and she was interviewed. Well, now she's the expert. Like, if you go to events about, being an author, she's now, but it's been 10 years. But yeah, so imposter syndrome is it's something we all deal with. And, for me, I still do that in person when I'm at an event. There are times when I just have to mentally get over there and talk to some people, because I'm just like, that's so, and I'm just me, and they don't want to talk to me, So that's how I reset. To get back to your question, I just go back and go, well, just be yourself, talk to your invisible friend across the desk from you, and do do the best you can and realize sometimes your best is better than the last best or something like that. Sometimes not every chapter in a book is going to be a home run. So you do the best you can. So, but Danny, I think we're going to call it on that. Everybody go to DannyPod.com and you can see all the things that he is up to. Holy cow, you are a busy guy. And again, we talked a lot about Captivate today, so I'm going to spit out my affiliate link, supportthisShow.com/Captivate. And if you want to learn Captivate, now, number one, they have a ton of stuff on their website, but I have Captivate is one of the courses at the School of Podcasting because, like I said, I like it. So, Danny, anything coming up this week that we should know about as we get ready to wrap up here?
No, I mean, I've got a father-son soccer game tomorrow, so I might be dead on Monday. And then I'm just planning a new podcast launch for June 27th. So yeah, just because I've not got enough podcasts.
Yeah, there you go. So you're actually playing with your son though?
Yeah. So, well, no, I'm playing against him. So he plays down in Barry's, a city about an hour away. So he plays on a team there, and the team is playing against the dads for Father's Day.
Yeah, that's one of those things that sounds fun until you wake up the next day and you can't move. Yeah,
mate,
so
I'm 55. I'm not going to. I'll last 5 minutes and that's it.
Yeah, I remember in my 20s, we would go to the park on Thanksgiving and play tackle football with no pads or anything. And I go, what's and I remember the next day waking up and not being able to move. So when you use muscles you haven't used in a while, it'll, nothing makes you feel, more old than waking up the next day going, hey, I can't do stuff I used to do. So that'll be fun. I
have the fitness of a podcaster.
That's it, my friend. On the School of Podcasting, you heard me say I'm doing an episode about why do reaction videos get reactions, and that kind of the underlying, the tagline is why you need to put your opinion out there, because I realize sometimes we're worried about being canceled or all that other fun stuff. So we'll be talking about that, and you'll hear a clip from In and Around Podcasting. So when we talked about the stupid stuff on podcasting, that'll be in there. Jim will be back next week, and thanks to Mark over at podcastbranding.co and Dan at basedonatruestorypodcast.com. Thank you to the chat room, and of course, like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and we'll see you again real soon with another episode of Ask the Podcast Coach.